Welcome to War Games on Toast, all of you lovely people. Today is going to be a bit of a change-up, and I am not going to talk about the latest edition of Warcry, and I am not going to talk about warbands. That's right, today is the first ever Toast Talk, and this is in celebration of hitting 500 subscribers, and of course, that milestone is all thanks to you. Toast Talk is going to be, hopefully, a weekly, maybe bi-weekly thing, normally on a Saturday. This week, however, it's going to be on a Wednesday because it's a special occasion and I got a little bit too excited to try out something new, and my voice is back to tip-top condition, and I have a brand new microphone. So I thought I may as well indulge a little bit and get this out a little bit early. Today's Toast Talk is going to be about my first ever experience in this hobby and how that has helped shape me as a wargamer. I would love to hear your stories when it comes to getting into the hobby, because everyone has a different first experience, and whilst you're down there, please consider leaving a like and also subscribing. It helps the channel out an awful lot, and more importantly, it helps me fight against that dastardly YouTube algorithmic demon. But without further ado, let's get on with the show. So, who am I and how did I get into the Warhammer hobby? Well, I am Toast, nice to meet you, and I was first exposed to Warhammer when I was 9. However, my desire to see what this was all about came much earlier. If my accent hasn't given it away already, I am from the north of England, and one of the major places to go shopping up in the north is a place called the Metro Centre, and it's basically a mall. Although, from what I understand, it's a rather big one by European standards, although I suspect rather small compared to American standards. Anyway, from as young as I can remember, I recall my dad walking past Games Workshop that existed within the Metro Centre. It was a pretty small shop, only having maybe 2 or 3 gaming tables, and those were mostly for starter games, and a small painting area. But despite this, it was always packed with people. I wanted to go and check it out and see what all the fuss was, and the big blue space soldier in the window certainly was part of the reason why. But unfortunately, my dad knew exactly what Warhammer was and refused every single time. To this day, he has never stepped into a Games Workshop, as far as I'm aware at least, even though he plays the video games on a fairly regular basis. I eventually managed to convince my mum and then stepdad to take me in with my stepbrother when I was, well, 9. And this was a big moment for me, naturally. This big, bearded, burly man approached me and just crouched down with his massive, toothy grin and asked if I wanted to have a go. After he'd spotted me eyeing up some of the boards, I was particularly drawn to Warhammer Fantasy. It was Beastmen vs Empire, and I said yes. He took me and my brother at the table, and we got to playing. The game itself was quite short, and I don't remember all that much about it, but I do remember having control over a group of metal minotaurs and some gore, where my brother had some handgunners and I believe a unit of halberdiers. What I remember vividly is how the guy was acting out and performing during the game. He weaved this story of brave humans fighting against bloodthirsty beasts. Every time my minotaurs attacked, he would enact the swinging of the axe or the charging of the unit, and it really stuck with me. It gives me this warm memory that still makes me smile to this day. And as a father myself now, 21 years later, I've tried to get my kids into Warhammer, into Warcry, and you better believe I am just as animated and just as over the top as that guy was. I don't know the guy's name, and I never saw him again, and he will likely never see this video. But if he did, I just wanted to say you are an absolute legend, and thank you for getting me involved in this amazing hobby. Unfortunately, I didn't actually get to play Warhammer at all for years after this first encounter. After the first game, I was allowed to buy 1 box, so I bought myself some Tomb Kings. and a few paints. My brother bought some Warriors of Chaos, I think they were called at the time. And because I didn't live with my brother, and the fact he wasn't actually that impressed by the starter game, I never played with him and I never got to use my Tomb Kings. Eventually, I did build up a small army. I had, some Skelly Bobs, some archers, a scorpion, a giant, and it was pretty cool. And I even started a second army of Dark Elves, and that was a fun time too, building up Corsairs and the Cold One Riders and a big-ass dragon. But again, I never got to play with them either. It wasn't until I was about 12-ish that I actually got a chance to play some Warhammer. And it wasn't fantasy, it was actually 40k. It turns out some of my school friends had amassed a small collection of Warhammer 40,000, so I decided to pick up some Imperial Guard and we started a school club. Whilst my fantasy armies gathered dust on my shelf, sadly, I was having a blast with some mates after school every Tuesday. Some of my fondest memories of 40k were from those days. We would have these epic battles, such as battle royales between our characters, the Avatar of Cain, the Nightbringer, Ghazghkull, Captain Cortez, points if you remember Captain Cortez, Dante, Azrael, Abaddon, Calgar, Creed. It was a bloodbath of a battle royale, and my mate who was running Dante was massively overconfident and spent an entire week leading to this bloodbath, bragging about how the Lord Commander of the Blood Angels would destroy everyone, especially that lowly captain from the Crimson Fists. Clearly a lesser chapter. Roll on that week and the game started. Dante flew in on his jetpack, axe in hand, attacked Captain Cortez, whiffed all of his attacks, and then got one shot with a power fist in return because, of course, back in those days, instant death was a thing, and Dante was no exception to that rule. It was hilarious. The look of horror, shame, and disappointment on his face was priceless. I was running Creed and Kel, and I did fairly well. Kel actually took out Captain Cortez. The Avatar and the Nightbringer duked it out for godhood. I was eventually removed from the game when Azrael sliced me in half, moments before Abaddon ripped him in half as well with his epic Claw of Horus. I think in the end Ghazghkull won and also won in the shooting phase, which was just the biggest insult to every other character there. It was a great game, and me and my friends still talk about how awesome that game was all these years later. But once we moved from middle school and went into high school, the club ended and we just didn't play anymore. I still wanted to brawl, but the spark had died within my group of friends and people had moved on. So in the end, my armies stopped gathering dust and instead got sold. This is my biggest regret as a wargamer and one that quite literally haunts me to this day. Most wargamers have models that they can pull out of, old cupboards and boxes showing their first ever armies or model or anything, and I have none of that. Every single thing I had as a child no longer exists with me. They are gone. And honestly, at this point, all I can do is hope someone finally got to make use of my fantasy stuff, because they deserve to be played after years on my shelf and not a single human around to play with. It's a sad. It still makes us a bit sad to think about, really. But roll on 6 more years, and I find myself just mindlessly wandering into a Games Workshop, although this time it was in Newcastle. I was 18, 19-ish, and bumped into some people who quickly became friends. Connor, Luke, and Michael. We've since fallen out of contact, but if by any chance they're watching, it will be fantastic to catch up. This is where my Warhammer career really kicked off. I got back into fantasy and started running Beastmen and Wood Elves. I got back into 40k and was running Grey Knights, Black Templars, Ravenwing, and I even got into Lord of the Rings and ran some Moria Goblins. It was all a great time, and we'd meet up every week for a day of bloodshed and gore in whatever system we decided to play at the time. I discovered mini wargaming, became a moderator, and wrote massive guides on Eldar, Necrons, Wood Elves, Beastmen, Britannia, just to name a few. and I even started a Warhammer YouTube channel. This was at a time where Warhammer YouTube was tiny, and I mean the biggest names in the business were Jabberballs, Mr. Malorian, and Fritz, all of which I believe are still on YouTube, but none have taken off like the modern titans, like say Tabletop Tactics or Play on Tabletop. So I was a small fish, but also a small fish in an even smaller pond. I think I peaked at 200 subscribers, and it was mostly battle reports against guys I'd met in the store. Eventually, I went to Warhammer World and did some tournaments. I placed well in 40k, ranked highly with Wood Elves at the time, when Wood Elves were 2 or 3 editions without a book. It was the peak of my relatively short competitive career, and then I just stopped out of nowhere. My partner at the time wasn't massively happy with me spending so much time playing with toy soldiers with my friends on the weekend, so I abruptly vanished. My channel died, I lost contact with all the friends I'd gained over the years, and wouldn't you believe, we eventually broke up, so it was all for nothing. Fast forward about 9 years, and I am here now. I'm getting married, I have 2 kids, a 3rd child on the way, and I am teaching Warhammer and Warcry to my oldest son and his best friend, while squeezing games in where I can myself. I wanted to restart my YouTube journey, so I did. Here I am, once again, on YouTube, only this time my content is actually good, or at the very least, slightly better, because my god, that stuff was terrible back in the day. And that's the quick breakdown of my story. That's how I got into Warhammer and why I am where I am now. It's been a rather bumpy ride, but one that I'm happy to have taken. I've privated all of my old videos on my old channel, and I don't even think Mini Wargaming has a forum anymore. But if you were one of the odd ones who existed on Mini Wargaming's forums back in the day, and you read a lengthy tome on factions, you probably read my stuff. Heck, if you recall an unkempt teen doing battle reports on a channel called Wanderer's Glade, that was me. That weirdo was me. If not, be thankful, because crikey, those videos were awful. I watched one before I privated the whole channel and nuked it from orbit, and man, they were terrible. They were so bad. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. If you made it this far, thanks for supporting the channel. It means an awful lot. Please remember to hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments below your story. How did you get into the hobby, and did you have any bumps along the way? Until next time, I'll catch you in the next video. Ta-ra!